So our next speaker is Thomas Kœhler from Inria, and he will be talking to us about interactive source-to-source optimizations validated using static resource analysis.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk about this work, which is also about a tool that we built around this called OptiTrust. And this is work that I've done with with my other colleagues from Inria, and in particular, Arthur is here today. So first of all, what is our motivation for this work? Our motivation is that producing high-performance code is hard. So if a programmer wants to optimize their code, they have multiple options. Ideally, they would like to use some automatic optimization tools, so typically compiler. But compilers have a very difficult task in optimization. So they have to decide what optimizations are correct, and they also have to decide what optimizations are beneficial. So in practice, compilers often fall short. This is because they rely on fragile heuristics, or they have a restricted optimization purpose by design. So either a restricted domain of application, or the optimizations that they try to apply are limited. And the problem is that when compilers fall short, programmers typically fall back to manual optimization. So the problem with that is that manual optimization is time-consuming and error-prone. So we don't want that. We don't want programmers to have to choose between automatic optimization and manual optimization. This is why we care about interactive optimization, but there aren't that many interactive optimization tools out there. We want to save time with automation, avoid errors with static analysis, but at the same time, we still want to leverage human expertise and to avoid the fallback to manual optimization. So that's why we built the OptiTrust interactive optimization framework, where the overall idea is that users direct optimizations over C code, and the OptiTrust framework will check the correctness of the applied optimizations. So we are working on multiple case studies, and we have 2 case studies that are working right now. The first one is matrix multiplication in the domain of linear algebra. And this is the case study that I will focus on for this talk. But we also have a fully working case study on image processing, where we optimize box filter on rows, which is standard in bigger image processing pipelines. And we are also working towards more complicated case studies. So there is one in image processing called high-risk corner detection, and one in physics simulation that is called particle in cell. So focusing now on the matrix multiplication case study, if we think first about how you would optimize it by hand, this is what it would look like. So you start from naive C code, as you can see on the left, which simply is simply using 3 nested loops and a sum accumulator. And after a lot of trying out a lot of different ways to rewrite this code, you end up with the code that is shown on the right, and I don't expect you to read all the details. But the bottom line is that this code is 150 times faster on the CPU. It takes about 7 times more characters to write, and the entire manual optimization process is very time-consuming and error-prone. So it's common to spend months optimizing this kind of code. The optimizations that are applied at a high level, so the code is specializing input sizes here to constants of 1024. So these are the dimensions of the matrices. We're improving data locality by applying common loop transformations and also data layout transformations. And we're also parallelizing the code. So we are adding vectorization and multi-threading. If you don't want to do this by hand, the alternative in the state of the art is to use domain-specific compilers. So in TVM, for example, which is an industrial strength compiler for machine learning, you can describe what you want to compute on the left by writing what they call an algorithm. And you can separately write on the right side, describe how to compute this algorithm by writing what they call a schedule. So I'm not going to go into the details of the syntax, but this approach has some advantages and inconvenience. So if we think about the algorithm description, what is nice is that this is a high-level domain-specific language, so it's concise to use and it's also easier to analyze than other languages. But the problem is that the domain of application of this language is restricted by design, and in particular for this matrix multiplication optimization, the algorithm had to be rewritten in order to apply optimizations, even though the promise of the separation between algorithm and schedule is that you shouldn't change your algorithm when you optimize it. But here we had to rewrite it anyway. And then if you think about the advantages and disadvantages of the schedule on the right, schedules are fairly concise to write if you compare it to the final optimized code that is generated. And it's relatively safe to write as well, because at least in theory, TVM is promising us that we can write any schedule and we will still compute the same thing that we described in the algorithm. The problem with these schedules is that they have a limited set of built-in optimizations. So if you want to perform an optimization that TVM does not support, it can be very difficult. And also, TVM combines the algorithm and the schedule to generate some code using some black box that is very hard to understand. So for a given algorithm and a given schedule, there are many ways to generate code. So TVM uses implicit heuristics, and if you don't like what these heuristics are doing, you don't have control over them. And if you want to understand what is going wrong in the code generation process, it's difficult because all you have are intermediate representations of the compiler that are not meant for the user. So instead, what we do with OptiTrust is that we describe what to compute directly using general purpose code, so C code in this case, as shown on the left. So here you just find again the naive program with 3 loops. I just added a function signature around. And we describe how to optimize this code by writing what we call a transformation script. So when I say that we start from general purpose code, there is we do have to annotate this code because C code is very hard to reason about in general. So we ask the users to also add some resource annotations, and I will talk a little bit more about them in the following slides. But overall, with OptiTrust, we apply source-to-source transformations. So that means we don't have, for every intermediate optimization step or transformation step, we actually have C code, and our output is C code. We validate these transformations using a static resource analysis based on separation logic that I will talk a little bit more about. We don't have any black box code generation, because when you apply the transformation script, you just have you're transforming the C code, and in the end you just have the C code. So you don't need to apply any heuristics at the end. And it's easier to compose and to extend because if you have 2 transformations, you can put them back to back, and you can also add a new transformation without having to change any code generation process, like for TVM. So if we look a little closer at these annotations, the user needs to provide function contracts. So here we have clauses that describe ownership of resources, or you can also think about them as permissions. The reads clause is saying that this function is reading two matrices. So we're reading from matrix A, and we know its dimensions. And we're also reading from matrix B, and we know its dimensions. The modifies clause says that we are modifying matrix C, so we're at the same time going to read and write to matrix C. And when I say matrix, we see matrices as conjunctions, as a conjunction of cells. So for us, a matrix is just a bunch of cells, and we write it with these stars with ranges, as you can see on the bottom of the slide. The user also needs to provide us with partial loop contracts. So here we have these new clauses that are X modifies. And what's particular about them is that they describe resources that are exclusive to loop iteration. So here, these two annotations, overall, what they're saying is that the loops over I and J, they separately modify different cells of the matrix C. So we know that we're not going to have any dependencies between these iterations on this resource. Now we also automatically infer some more annotations. So without going through all of them, what's interesting is that we have also shared resources for loops. So we have, for example, the S reads, where S stands for shared, which means that these resources are shared among all iterations, and there could be dependencies between iterations on these resources. And we also insert what we call ghost operations. So you can see, for example, the matrix focus ghost operations. And these operations, they are just here to explain to our resource analysis how to change view on resources. So sometimes there are some reasoning steps that are difficult to automate, and these ghost operations are here to explicitly tell us you need to apply this reasoning step. Once we have all these annotations, we can automatically compute the resources available at every program point. So it looks somewhat like this. And without going over all of these resources, what I want to point out is that here in blue, we have this resource called named R1 that says that we own a fraction of the matrix A. So the fraction here is what we use to encode read-only resources. So if we only own a fraction of a resource, that means we cannot write to it, and we can only read from it. And we can look at another resource. So here, the resource 10 on the sum is not a fraction, so that means we can write to it. And in fact, we can see that after the for loop, the resource name has changed, and this is because we not only track what is in memory, so we don't only care about the fact that we have a cell at the address of sum, but we also care about the fact that this for loop has just modified this resource, so we changed its name, and we know that modification happened. Now if we move on to the transformations that we are applying, most of the transformations from the scripts are what we call combined transformations, which means that they are composing basic transformations, and they are valid by composition, because we asked basic transformations to check for correctness. So in our MathMill case study, we have 8 script steps that result in about 55 basic transformations and also 61 ghost transformations. So these are transformations that are purely that are only here to help with resource computation. So if we look at the first transformation step, even though we are just specifying a loop order that we care about, behind the scenes this is achieved by applying 18 basic transformations, and in particular transformations that swap or fission loops. We can visualize, because OptiTrust is an interactive tool, we can visualize what the script is doing. So this is a screenshot of what the user can see with, on the left, all the transformation steps that are applied with the sub-steps, because we have these combined transformations that call over transformations, and in the middle, difference. So you have the code before the transformation step that is currently being visualized, and the code after the transformation. Regarding basic transformations, they directly transform the AST. And so internally, we don't directly work with CAST. We transform a simplified imperative lambda calculus. And each basic transformation is responsible for checking sufficient correctness conditions. So we have transformations on instructions, functions, variables, etc. Just to give an idea of what our correctness criteria look like, this one is for moving instructions. So we need to know when it's safe to swap two groups of instructions. And without explaining the formalism that is on this slide, what is important is that we are leveraging the computed resource information. Here that is, you can see with the delta 1 and delta 2 that tell us how these group of instructions are using our resources. And intuitively, this is correct if the resources used by T1 and T2 are exclusively shared in read-only. We can also have more complex criteria for loop transformations, so loop fusion here, for example. And I don't have time to explain how this criteria works, but what is interesting is that now you can see with this key variables that we're also leveraging the loop contracts, and that we also have to synthesize on the right side a new loop contract, and we can do this. So to conclude, OptiTrust is an interactive framework for optimizing general purpose C code. Transformations are validated using a static resource analysis. We've completed 2 case studies. We are working on more, and we're interested in hearing if you have other case studies in mind. We have a lot of future work on mind as well. So thank you for your attention. We are open to collaboration, and you can also find our code online, which is open source. And you can also play around with the traces of our case studies if you want to see what is happening in more detail.
We have time for a couple of questions.
So one optimization that matrix multiplication is usually using is a loop interchanged. So you switch the two inner loops. Is that an option that you can support here, or this is beyond what the tool can?
Yes, that's just what is called loop swap here. So this loop reorder at is doing 4 loop interchanges.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Hi, this is really interesting. Can you say a little bit more about what exactly is computed by the static resource analysis? I think what's going on is that it computes something like the memory footprints for each instruction, and then you use that information along with extra conditions to verify the correctness of these transformations. Does that sound right?
So we can see it a little bit as type checking, and what we have is a typing context at every program point. So what I've shown here between the instructions, and this tells you what are all the available resources, and also, for example, whether you only have a fraction of them. And you can also know, if you compare the context before and after an instruction, you can know what if the instruction has changed any resource. So that's what we're computing.
Right. And then you need to check some extra conditions on top of that to show that it's like an input to information that's available for the correctness checks.
Yes,
like on its own, it
every
doesn't prove correctness.
transformation. So on its own, it just says the code is modifying this, using these resources in a legal way. But then each transformation has their own criteria. So like this one, where they leverage this information, but they have to individually check for their own conditions.
Thank you.
Yeah, just as a follow-up question, as a sanity check. Initially, I think you showed some hand-optimized version of the matrix multiplication or something. Is it possible to get to that state with your tool, or is that beyond what you can do right now?
That's exactly the tool that the code that we are generating. Maybe I should have made that clear.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. That was exactly my question. Okay, one more question.
Sorry, I came in the middle of the presentation, and I'm a bit puzzled with the annotations that we are requiring that be made, because it seems that several of those properties could be identified by static analysis without needing for annotation.
I think if you have tools that can infer these annotations, it's something that we would always like to automate more. But I think we're coming more from the side of the manual optimization, in the sense that we want to be as expressive as possible without having to worry about what can be automatically inferred and what needs to be annotated by the user. And then as a second step, do things like I've shown on this slide, where we automatically infer some of the annotations, and of course, automatically inferring more of them is always beneficial to us.
Okay, my view might be biased because we work in matrix multiplication quite a bit, and we did pattern detection of those things. So,
Thank you. Let's take the speaker again. Thank you.